Assalamu alaikum. First of all, I would like to express my deep sense of gratitude to the organizers. I'm very grateful to them for having invited me to this land, which from my childhood I have associated with Tahzeeb and Adab. So I am very happy to be here, and I mean the kind of hospitality, Mehman Nawazi that I have received, I really feel absolutely at home. So thank you very much. Now to come to the topic, we have heard many people, and many of us realize what the nature of the problem is. The question is, what is the solution? And that is what I would like to address. So I think that let us first of all look at the dimensions of academic imperialism. Today, Iran is facing political imperialism. It is at the receiving end of a lot of imperialistic pressure. However, that is what you see on the surface. There is an underground imperialism which is taking place. Apart from the hard power, there is a question of soft power, and that takes place through academic imperialism. And let me clarify what I am saying. Ultimately, today, why does one want science and technology? One wants science and technology basically as an instrument of power, not necessarily to dominate others, but also to prevent others from dominating one. It's not that, if you don't have something, then also you can be dominated. All right. So therefore, since we want technology, therefore we want science. And therefore the question is science education. But what kind of science education? And that is where the issue begins. That in order to have science education, in order to have technology, in order to have science education, we must imitate the West. And when I say we, I mean this is a similar problem in Iran and in India. So we must imitate the West. This is why the education system is very largely modeled on the West. Now, for something like 175 years, we have been having Western education. The idea is that in order to catch up with the West, we must imitate the West. 175 years we have imitated the West, and nothing has happened. We haven't caught up. We're still behind. Let's take a simple example of space technology in India. So space technology, there has been quite a lot of noise about it, but actually speaking, what we have got are things, cryogenic engines. And if you look at it, today we sent a rocket to the moon, but if you look at what the US did, it sent, Neil Armstrong went to the moon, maybe, how much was it, 40 years ago? So we are 40 years behind the times. And this is what happens, that technology is the carrot which is dangled in front, and then you keep following, you keep imitating, and you can never catch up. In 175 years, we could not catch up. I think we have to learn a lesson from that. We have to learn a lesson that this sort of imitation is not going to help. The second point I would like to make is that the technology gap is not actually that big. It looks big, but it's not that big. And the first time I realized it was when I helped to build the supercomputer. It looked impossible. Nobody knew anything about computation, and we were told that in 3 years you have to build a supercomputer. And there was a student of Pune University who said, "What are you doing this? You must be mad." It looked so impossible at that point of time. But we did it. The Craig company went out of business. But now what happens is that through government machinations, all those things come back. And this is similar to what happens in Iran. It is perfectly possible for Iran to build a bomb or whatever very easily. But it does not happen because there is so much pressure. There's so much pressure to prevent it from happening. So let us also realize that if you cannot acquire technology, it is not because you are not imitating the West, it is because there is tremendous pressure, imperial pressure being brought in. And therefore, I would suggest that it is not really technology or hard power which is the critical issue, but soft power. And this soft power is what flows from, this is what academic imperialism is all about. That you dangle the carrot of technology, make people follow you, imitate you, and then they are entrained, because this is precisely what happened in India. How did the British rule India? They were very few in number. They did not have advanced technology. But they got a whole group of people whom they inculcated British values, who became aligned to the British. And with the help of this large group of people, well, not very large group of people, as a percentage of the population, it was very small, it was very tiny. With the help of this group of people, they ruled the country. And, well, nothing much has changed after independence. I don't want to go into all those details. But the point, as I said, was that question I want to raise is, what is the solution? So, once more, I would like to look at how Western education was introduced into India. And the way it was introduced by Macaulay was by saying that at that time, there were schools in Sanskrit and Arabic in the country. And what Macaulay said was that these schools have nothing worth teaching. Therefore, you must teach science and so on, and you must teach that in English. And it was not only Macaulay who said that, there were Indians like Raja Ram Mohan Roy who said that. So, the reason he was able to say that was that at that point of time, there was a racist history of science prevailing. And this said that science is basically a creation of the West. And this was a complete falsehood. See, soft power flows from these kinds of falsehoods. So the idea was that science is why must you imitate the West? Because science is the creation of the West, we must do it the way they did it. And I think that that is the first step to understand that there is a problem with the history of science. I have this small booklet. I was hoping to show the picture, but if you can't see the picture, you can take the booklet. The idea is, the title is Science Western in Origin? And the idea is that the entire history of science that you have learned is false. And the problem is that, as Vinay said, well, you do not have models for that in India. You do not have a single department of history and philosophy of science in India. And even if you have, what they would do is they would imitate, because they have to get their points. So they would imitate whatever is done, and it becomes very difficult for somebody to take up a new perspective. All right. So I think that the justification that was given was that science is of Western origin, therefore you must imitate the West. And so I think if we want to dismantle, let's go step by step. First thing you need to do is to dismantle the existing history of science, as I suggested. There's another book that I have here, which looks at the history of the calculus. Now, this history of the calculus, the idea is that calculus is basic to science. And the idea is that you have calculus developing in India, being taken over in Britain by Newton, and so on. Now, the issue is, since I have only 5 minutes, let me try and summarize it very quickly. All right, supposing I say the Copernicus did not do the work, Ibn Shatir did it, or that Newton did not do the work, some Indians did it. What difference does it make today? So the difference it makes, is a very critical, important difference, is the following, that when knowledge is transmitted from one place to another, it is never properly understood. So Newton made a mistake in understanding the Indian calculus, therefore there was a mistake in Newtonian physics, and that mistake needs to be corrected. The way of teaching these things needs to be corrected. So once we have changed that history, we need to do things differently. So what things differently? In particular, let me talk about mathematics education. Now, how many of you here are frightened of mathematics? So you are not frightened, all of you, the rest of you are very familiar with mathematics? Maybe I can ask you a question or two.
When you don't know something, you're not afraid of it. That's one explanation.
Okay. So the point is that mathematics has become something so very difficult, and it is the basis of science. So the idea is that if you have calculus having developed differently, you can teach it differently. And what I have demonstrated is that it is possible to teach the entire calculus course in 5 days. All right, if you know 8 standard mathematics thoroughly, 5 days. If you don't know that, it may take 2 weeks. So the idea is not only that we are just going back to something because not going back to some primitive thing, but we want to develop a better mathematics, a better physics, a better science, a different science from the West, a non-Western science, but a better science which can be done very easily. And we want to use that, the idea would be to use that to change the system of education and also to change the, when we are talking of higher education, to change the system of validation. That validation must be done by ourselves. We need to perform the experiment. We don't need to have somebody from Harvard or wherever telling us what to do. We need to perform the experiment, test for ourselves. So, for example, if this is a good system of education, let's try it out. Let's try it out, and indeed I plan to try it out now in Malaysia over the next 6 months so that we can demonstrate how this system works, test it out for ourselves, whether it works, and maybe we can try it out here as well. It would be very nice if it is tried out here. Thank you very much.